Welcome to the Rivals Rankings podcast. I'm Rankings Director Adam Friedman here with National Recruiting Analyst Marshall Levenson. Marshall, this week we updated the 2026 rankings, the brand new Rivals 250, offensive positions, defensive positions, state rankings, all of that good stuff. And you're based in the Mid-South, and number one still at the top of the Rivals 250 is five-star Jakeem Stewart, all-world defensive lineman. Could probably be a five-star in the 2025 class as well. So, Marshall, you got a chance to see Jakeem, I think, at least once this offseason, maybe twice. Where is he at in his development progression, and just what are some of the things you continue to see out of the number one player in the country?
Well, luckily, we were actually able to see him three times, I think. And so we got to see the steady progression, like you mentioned. And the biggest thing we saw is the measurables continue to get bigger. They continue to go on trend of what an elite defensive lineman looks like. He's edging up on 6'6". He's at 277. I think he's at 84-inch wingspan. So everything lines up exactly where it should when we're looking at an elite defensive lineman like this. And he's a guy that everywhere he shows up, he dominates. He doesn't lose reps. And if he does, it's not really a loss. It's more of a stalemate at times if he's going up against some other elite offensive linemen. He seeks out competition. I think that's one thing that, a lot of people are going to find out eventually if they haven't seen him play, is kind of the drive and that motivation he has, which has gotten him to where he is right now. But as far as being number one, there was really no one else in this update that had shown enough yet to pass him up, and I don't think we're going to see that for quite some time, if at all. And so he right now he looks like the exact mold of what you're looking for in a number one player.
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten a chance to see Jakeem a few times as well, and each time it's really impressive. He's got power, he's got speed, he's got technique, he's adding to that frame, and really the sky's the limit. He's listed as a strong side defensive end right now. We'll see how his body continues to develop, but 6'6", 270 already.
Yep.
We'll see what the college strength and conditioning programs do for him when he does reach the next level there. An interesting debate that we were having on the rankings call has to do with Lamar Brown. Lamar is one of the highest ranked players in the class, number 14 overall. We've got him listed as I think, defensive tackle right now, but there's a lot of conversation about him possibly being an offensive lineman, potentially a guard. We've got him listed 6'5", 260 pounds, really could play both sides of the ball at the next level. But where do you see him really ending up, Marshall?
I'm going to go with offensive line. I know he likes the defensive line position, but if you watch the film, even though he's only 260 pounds, if you can imagine him putting on another 30, 40 pounds over time, it's really impressive what he could look like on the offensive line. I think he could actually play both in college. Like, I think he has that skill set. I don't think you're going to see that from anybody, but he wants to play the defensive line position. But I think with the way, like you just mentioned, those measurables, and if you look at the film, the way that he drives and the way that he finishes as a blocker, I think he could be an elite interior offensive lineman. And it'll be a thing that we see him probably play both in high school. So we'll get a good look at what he can do, both on the field and in the camp setting over the next 2 years. But he's absolutely one of the top players in the country, regardless of which side he's on.
Yeah, I like what he brings to the field. Certainly that agility and his motor kind of lends itself to the defensive side of the ball a bit. And I think it comes a little bit more naturally to him on the defensive side of the ball. But long-term, as his body continues to develop, and I guess it kind of depends on what college he goes to. He's probably going to end up on the offensive side of the ball, though, if I really had to guess. It's going to be fascinating to see how he develops throughout the rest of the ranking cycle. But we'll be there every step of the way with him. Lots of camp appearances for him, and certainly plenty of in-person evaluations during the fall season. Marshall, there were a couple of other big movers in the Mid-South region, and really just out of Texas, in this rankings update. Two linebackers, actually. Kosi Akpala moves up to number 46 overall, and Tyon King, an inside linebacker from Texas as well, up to number 56. What really pushed these guys up the rankings?
The athleticism and the speed from that linebacker position. Obviously, Tyon being more of an inside backer, Kosi being an outside backer. Their film was awesome, and then they backed it up in the camp setting this year. just elite athleticism from both of them. They both have ideal builds and frames. And really they just continue trending. They're, another two guys out of Texas that they look the mold. They look, they look exactly what you're looking for. And they're going to only continue to get bigger and faster and stronger. So it's going to be fun to see if they continue to move up, positionally where they fit in as they continue to develop.
Yeah, both of them very similar frames, kind of. It's 6'2", 205, 215. Akpala, the heavier of the two, and that's why we have him listed more as an outside backer right now. He can rush off the edge, but he also has that athleticism to play in space, and certainly plenty of room to fill out that frame. Whereas with King, he can stand up off the ball, play inside. He sees running lanes well. He is a very good blitzer, but he comes downhill in a hurry, really explosive when chasing after ball carriers, and lays the wood. He is a big-time hitter. Really like what the energy that he brings. Yeah, big-time hitter. Loved the energy that he brings to that linebacker core, and he kind of inspires that defense. I see that on film. It's rare that you see that energy show up on film, and it kind of touches the rest of his teammates, and I think King has that as well. A few other guys that we need to hit on in the Mid-South in Texas, from your area there, Marshall. A few new additions to the Rivals 250. Dylan Berryman, a defensive tackle from Louisiana, enters the Rivals 250 at number 192. Jake Fetty, quarterback from Texas, at 227. Jordan Clay, a receiver also from Texas, at 228. And the big one that I wanted to talk with you about a little bit more was John Turntine, an offensive lineman, enters the Rivals 250 at number 23 overall. A really interesting build for him. 6'4", 317 pounds, even though he doesn't look like it, and incredibly long arms. Really carries that weight well, but I think 80+ inch wingspan we got him at the Rivals camp, and you were there to really get a close look at him. So what did you see from Turntine when he showed up there at the Rivals camp?
Well, like you said, the size pops up first. I mean, not too tall at 6'4", but 317 pounds. Holds it extremely well. You wouldn't even know that he's over 300. And then the 83-inch wingspan. So he was playing tackle. You would think it maybe 6'4", maybe projects as more interior, but with that wingspan, he can glide out there to the edge and kind of push. What he was pushing a lot of guys to the outside. Really did not let them get the edge on him. Feet looked really good. Hands were great. Another guy that's had a big off season. He's been trending up for a lot this off season. And I don't remember what number he's at now, but he's high up there. He's one of the top tackles in the country.
Number 23 overall in the Rivals.
Yeah, 23 overall. So, and that'll be another discussion, just like, with positionally, maybe with Brown, obviously not moving to the defense, but is he going to be interior? Is he at tackle? Certainly those 83-inch arms help his case there. But he's another one that I'm excited to see how he builds out. Already at 317, how much is he going to add? And that's another kind of debate of whether it's going to be inside or outside. So he's going to be an exciting one to watch build. And, he has a frame that could be pretty special.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the versatility that he shows up with on the film. Certainly plays at tackle on the at the high school level, but could play on the right side, could play inside, depending on how his body develops. Love the way he works as a pass blocker, really agile, gets to his gets off the line really quickly, gets to his spot quickly, and really gets a good push, even though you wouldn't really think that he's super strong at 317 pounds. He carries that so well. You don't really see this hulking offensive lineman who's just a road grader, but he does move people, and he gets to that second level, gets his hands on linebackers to open up those running lanes down the field. He's also good, on screen plays. He gets out there and gets his hands on those defensive backs to let those receivers, pick up big chunks of yards. So as a pass blocker, huge upside there with that wingspan, those quick feet. Would love to see him just get a little bit stronger coming, when he works against those counter moves and tries to slide inside a little bit and cut those guys off. But he's still just a younger guy. This is the 2026 class. So we've got we've got plenty of time to see that develop there. So, Marshall, thanks for joining me here on the Rivals Rankings podcast. A lot of big time moves there in the Mid-South. We'll keep it locked on your coverage of those guys. Please make sure you catch Marshall's content on Rivals.com, and please do give him a follow on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you very much, Marshall.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.
I'm now joined by national recruiting analyst Greg Smith to discuss some of the biggest movers and biggest news in the Midwest during this rankings update. Greg, Jackson Cantwell, #1 offensive tackle, still there, one of your guys that you cover out of Missouri, and still remains one of the most impressive players in this class from a measurable standpoint. He hasn't competed a ton this offseason just yet, but what have you seen from Cantwell that kept him at #1? And what do you think he's going to be able to do to keep off some of these hard charging offensive tackles who are coming up quick behind him?
Yeah, like he's just a tremendous prospect, like you said, from the measurable standpoint. Like when you see him, and I've seen him in person at a visit weekend at Nebraska a while back, and he's all of 6'8", 300 plus pounds, and so that jumps out to you right away. He's a really strong kid. He's explosive as well, as you see kind of with his track beats that he has going on. It seems like every time you look up, he's at a track meet breaking some sort of record for throwing, and which should be the case considering both of his parents are Olympic athletes, and they both were throwers, right? So you would think that he's got the bloodlines to do that. But the thing with him is, and it's not a knock on him necessarily, but it is the fact that we haven't seen him a lot, especially in relation to, like you mentioned, some of those guys that are hard charging. And this happens kind of in the evolution of a recruiting cycle, right? Like you have these guys that you rank highly and they're deservedly so, but then you're always just going to naturally have guys that make those charges and kind of come up for a variety of reasons. And one of them being getting more exposure and more data points to those guys and evaluation points, right? And we've gotten a lot more of those on some of those guys that are moving up versus Cantwell, who we just haven't seen as much. So the thing that we're going to be looking for is to be able to see him, right? I think that to see him #1 is, first and foremost, is the good thing doing football stuff, but then also it would just be awesome to see him in one of these kind of combine all-star situations, camp situations, where he could go against guys that are at the elite ranking level that he also is at versus the guys that he's going to typically see on a Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with Cantwell. I mean, incredible measurables. Both parents are Olympians. He's breaking, throwing records at seemingly every meet he goes to, but hasn't had a lot of experience against those elite pass rushers he's going to see at the next level. Meanwhile, there's guys like 5-star Kenny Pepe right behind him, and then Emmanuel Iheanacho, who's a new 5-star at third on the offensive tackle list, who honestly could end up rising even more. And then just after him is Maxwell Riley from Ohio, Pierre Dean from North Carolina, John Turntine, who is also a riser in this rankings update. So there are some really talented players on this list at offensive tackle who, Cantwell, can't just sit there and not progress during this process. So I'm sure he's working. We just haven't seen it yet. There hasn't been a chance to do an in-person evaluation of him this offseason. So this fall will be a really big opportunity for us to get a status update on him. Moving forward, though, there are plenty of other rankings movers and shakers in the Midwest. Greg, two new guys that I want to hit on with you that entered the Rivals 250, both from Ohio and both linebackers. Cam Thomas at number 107 overall, and then Sincere Johnson, an inside linebacker, at number 185. What pushed these guys into the Rivals 250 during this rankings update?
Yeah, I'll start with Sincere Johnson, and it's interesting as from the same state, both linebackers, but both of those guys really are very different types of linebackers. Sincere Johnson, though, is more of a traditional inside linebacker, kind of a thumper, a heavy hitter. He will definitely come up and strike you and meet the ball carrier in the hole, but he's got enough athleticism to also play a little bit of off-ball linebacker. I just really like his game overall. I think he has a wrestling background as well, which is always helpful, I think, for those linebackers. And defensive front seven players in general, right? And then with Cam Thomas, we were able to see him at Rivals Indianapolis, and he did a good job out there. Was a gold ball winner at linebacker, and really one of his first linebacker events that he had done. And there's a couple of these guys in the Midwest this cycle, and Cam Thomas is one of them, that started off at safety, just continued to get bigger, and they have now slid down to the second level of the defense. And I think Cam has an opportunity to really be kind of a lot of schools use various position names for this, but that kind of edge, outside linebacker, jack kind of position that a lot of people have. Viper, I think, is what it's called at Notre Dame. Like it's a different name everywhere, right? But Cam can definitely fit into that because I think he's going to continue getting bigger as well. That a guy that can also play outside linebacker and rush off the edge, but maybe even put his hand in the dirt down the line as well, some to help out a college defense.
Yeah, the Sincere Johnson, that physicality really stood out to me. He's listed as an inside linebacker. He fights off those blockers, sees those running lanes, and puts on big hits on those running backs or whoever's carrying the ball there. He's also a pretty good blitzer between the tackles as well. And Thomas, like you said, kind of a converted safety moving into the box. That explosiveness is obvious on film. You can see him running sideline to sideline. He's an asset in coverage, but he's physical enough to come off the edge and create havoc in the backfield. So I like those two moves for these two linebackers from Ohio. A few other big movers in the Midwest. Quarterback Jonas Williams, I want to stick on him for a minute. A big riser, over 100 spots now at number 108 in the Rivals 250. Quarterback out of Illinois, big arm. We've seen some progress from him, though, this offseason. Greg, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you've seen from Jonas Williams over the last few months?
Yeah, he's been a really interesting prospect to follow because I think the growth potential and seeing kind of his stock trending up over time is what has really helped him. And it's great to see out of him, right? As he's a guy that we've seen a bunch of times because he plays with Midwest Boom 7-on-7 out of Chicago. And those guys are one of the few Midwest programs that kind of get around everywhere, right? So I went out there to Chicago and I saw him like early in the winter. And I honestly, frankly, thought he was okay in that tournament, right? And then, but when stakes were high, he'd play well, he'd make a nice play. So I'm like, okay, we just need to level out the consistency, right? So then I see him another time, and he was pretty good that other time as well. But then he went down to Orlando for OT7, and our colleague John Garcia saw him down there and thought he was great, right? And so that continued growth that has happened with his game, you've also seen more schools come in as a result, right? As we were kind of wondering about, he was a 4-star kid, highly rated, but there was just not a lot going on with his recruitment, and that has definitely changed. He told me he's going out to Oregon this month in June. Oklahoma, LSU have also offered him this offseason as well. He plans to go down and visit those schools as well. He's definitely, even for a kid that had been around the low end of the top 50 before, he's definitely a stock up kid right now after kind of ironing out some of those consistency issues because he's got all of the tools otherwise. Moves well in the pocket, throws a good football, has good arm strength, just needed to iron out that consistency.
Yeah, what stood out to me when I watched his film was just how smooth he is as a pocket passer, and he has mobility to him. That's why he's listed as a dual threat quarterback. He's able to pick up yards with his legs, but he's a pass first kind of quarterback. He's not somebody who's going to look to take off as soon as he gets the ball in his hands if his first read is covered. He can go through a progression. He can layer his passes. He's got the arm strength to do pretty much anything he wants to on the field. The ball he can put it pretty much wherever he wants to as well. He does a good job taking some heat off those passes and making sure that he throws a catchable ball for these receivers. And those mechanics are pretty sound. So excited to see how much more he develops over the rest of this cycle. But there are a few other big-time players in the Midwest who did move as well. Tyreek King, a receiver from Tennessee, up to number 94 in the Rivals 250. Keenan Harris, another linebacker from the Midwest, up to 104 in the Rivals 250. Mikhail Blade, a weak side defensive end, up to 106. And then Elbert Hill, one of the top cornerbacks in the entire country, up to number 27 in the country there. You don't have to hit on every single one of these guys, but what were some of the things that really stuck out to you about this group?
Yeah, well, it's interesting is we're starting to see the rise of those defensive players, and outside of a receiver from Tennessee, Tyreek, like those defensive guys really making a move. Cam Thomas is another guy, or Keenan Harris, I'm sorry, is another guy that's similar to Cam Thomas. They were both at the same camp in Indianapolis, both the exact same situation, converted safeties coming down. I think that Keenan has a little bit more athleticism to his game right now as it relates to Cam Thomas, so that really stood out about him. Mikhail Blade, really, outside of being a part of the all-name team right away, he's the next, I think, in line of kind of those Illinois, pass rushing guys off the edge that we're starting to see that state really be known for over these last few cycles. It's becoming a real thing. Really like how he brushes the passer off of the edge. It's another good defensive group coming up in the Midwest.
Yeah, and Albert Hill, like I said, a big riser there, number 27 in the country, number 3 cornerback in the entire class, right behind Samari Matthews and Brandon Lockhart. So keep an eye on Hill moving forward. His recruitment matches his high ranking. Everybody in the country wants Albert Hill, so a good name to keep an eye on down the road there. All right, Greg, thank you so much for joining me here on the Rivals Rankings podcast. Make sure you guys catch all of Greg's content on Rivals.com. And please do give him a follow on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thank you.
I'm now joined by national recruiting analyst John Garcia Jr. here on the Rankings podcast here at Rivals. John, you cover the Southeast for us. That's your main focus. Number 1 in that area of the country, Tyler Atkinson, outside linebacker from Georgia. Number 2 in that area of the country, Kenny Pepe, the offensive tackle from IMG Academy. Those two guys, we've seen them a good bit throughout their careers. We saw Pepe at least twice this offseason. Atkinson has been a little hit or miss there. What can you tell us about the development of these two guys so far?
Yeah, I think both guys have always sort of looked and felt the part of a 5-star elite type of national recruit, and their offer lists both reflect that. I think for Atkinson, we're still a little bit curious about that position projection. Right now, he's pegged as an outside linebacker. We like him at the second level, extremely active, sideline to sideline, and he could still offer that moonlighting ability as a pass rusher, which is what you want to see from a linebacker. What can you do on third downs? We think pass rusher a little bit more than coverage guy, though. He's athletic enough to certainly do that. But as he continues to fill out, it will be interesting to see just where he may project down the line. But I think linebacker is the safest bet right now. And then with Pepe, elite pass blocker. He's starting to put on weight. He's getting closer to 300 pounds, which normally you're like, okay, that's a lot for a young guy. But he's 6'7", so he's not carrying any bad weight at this point, which is a great thing to see. And he's at IMG Academy, so he's going to continue to put on good weight on top of it. So, and that's what he needs, right? He's a great pass blocker who's known for being light on his feet, redirecting very well, and mirroring. So now as he adds bulk, maybe he can balance out and become a little bit more leverage savvy and a little bit more powerful at the point of contact, which I think for him is going to go a long way towards, becoming or contending for the top offensive tackle or offensive lineman in this class. Because as this update showed, it's pretty loaded up front.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Pepe, I wanted to stick on him for just a minute. He's number 1 in the state of Florida right now. If he finishes this cycle as number 1 in Florida, he would be the first number 1 from IMG Academy since JC Latham in 2021 and then Bear Alexander in 2022. So interesting to keep an eye on that. Number 3 in the Southeast right now is Anthony Jones. And we moved his position, this rankings update, from outside linebacker to weak side defensive end. He's added some mass to his frame. What is going on with his development? Do we really see him sticking at weak side defensive end throughout the rest of the cycle?
Yeah, he's one we're watching extremely closely. And talking to Jones, he's kind of admitted, hey, yeah, I'm curious about it too. Everyone loves his pass rushing ability. He's a great stand-up edge. I mean, look, we're talking about a top 15 guy who's probably in 5-star range throughout most of his prep career. But yeah, as he does add weight, I think we could start talking a little bit more about a versatile pass rusher, maybe a guy who's going to work outside and eventually in and have that variance to sell to a college program. But Jones does say he wants to stay trim. He wants to be more of that twitchy first step, speed edge rusher that we've seen and colleges have fallen in love with over the last few years down in the Mobile area. So it's really going to be up to him, at least in the foreseeable future. But obviously, again, all these guys, 2 more years of high school ball left. I mean, who's to say where these frames will fill out? But either way, a ferocious front 7 pass rusher who maybe adds to his bag as he gets a little bit bigger.
Well, Jones and I have one thing in common. We both want to stay trim. So there were a bunch of big movers though in the Southeast. 2 of them that we got to see at the same camp, the Rivals camp in South Florida, Miami area. Derek Cooper, number 1 athlete in the country, moved up 78 spots to number 18 overall. And Jordan Campbell also moved up 83 spots, both of them listed as athletes. John, I was there with you in person. I love what we saw from both of these guys. Both of them, I think, came away with awards from the same camp, even though they weren't really playing the position they're going to be playing at the next level, I don't think. But where do you see both of these guys projecting at the next level?
Yeah, both tagged as athletes right now for us at Rivals. Cooper, the number 1 athlete in the country. And yeah, they were both battling as running backs at Rivals Camp Miami. And that was really the battle between, who was going to win MVP and who was going to be first runner-up. And it looked like it was going to be Campbell, and then Cooper sort of solidified it with some spectacular one-on-one reps as a receiving back. So these guys can do it all. They're both over 6 foot, around 200 pounds. I think they could play linebacker. There's some safety talk with each of them. Each of them plays a ton of offense on Friday nights, whether it's running back. I mean, Derek Cooper's getting some wide receiver and H-back looks at Chaminade Madonna. I mean, truly a guy that you just move all around the field. So I think when he does continue to fill out, I think defense is probably the more likely destination. But he's kind of – you don't want to say Derrick Henry, but every time you do see him play offense, you're kind of like, there could be something to this thing because he's running guys over and he's running away from other guys. So he's as fascinating a prospect to evaluate in general as any in the country. But yeah, I think defense somewhere on the second level is probably most likely. But he keeps impressing on offense and kind of forcing our hand to keep him as an athlete projection instead of throwing him over on defense. And Campbell has a lot of those same qualities. He's just actually a little bit longer and leaner. So I think he's a safer bet to play defense because Cooper, again, just kind of forces our hand with those offensive plays every time we see him.
Yeah, both of them really explosive players, right, on both sides of the ball. Campbell, we've got listed 6'2", 200 pounds, which might be a little light right now. And then Cooper, 6'1", 200 pounds, also might be about 5 pounds lighter. So, but that reflects exactly what you're talking about, John. One's a little bit bigger, easier projection to linebacker, whereas the other one, Cooper, could play all over the defense, even offense at the next level. It'll be interesting to watch that play out over the next, I guess, 6 to 8 months this year. After the season, we'll reevaluate their positions, and then we've got a whole nother year of evaluations for them. A few other big movers in the Southeast. Nasir McCoy moved up 70 spots, the safety from Georgia. Caden Hall moved up 58 spots, another safety. He's from Florida. And then Jaquiz Wilkes, an athlete from Alabama, moving up 38 spots. Some new additions from the Southeast to the Rivals 250. A couple of guys I know we're really excited about, John. I was watching the film for Tristan Givens, new to the Rivals 100, jumped up to number 84 overall. You were texting me about this guy before we did a lot of the write-ups this week and some of the evals. What were you most excited about when you watched this guy?
Just looking for the premium position guys who you just feel most comfortable about. And this is a two-way guy. He's a basketball player. He does a lot of things at the prep level, but when he's rushing the passer, it just feels different. 6 foot, well over 200 pounds. He's got the first step that you look for, but then he's got this stride where he just gains ground in a hurry and he shrinks that window for quarterbacks. He racked up a ton of sacks last year at Carver Columbus, which is a school that has produced a lot of big name recruits. They play great competition down in South Georgia there as well. So a lot of good boxes to check already for Tristan Givens. And obviously he's only going to get bigger to potentially enhance those strengths here going forward. So you're always looking for great pass rushers, guys who can project on the weak side or potentially the strong side, depending on how they fill out. And Givens was one that, again, just his offers kind of led us to taking a closer look. And you see this spring that he's just screaming off the edge with relative ease. So as he comes into his own, I think he's a no doubt blue chip recruit who's going to have his pick of college program here soon enough.
Yeah, 6'4", 205 pounds. We've got him listed at maybe a little bit heavier than that, but still overall on the lighter side. Lots of room to fill out that frame. An explosive pass rusher. You can see him playing on offense too at the high school level, catching some passes as a tight end. There's a level of physicality there that I love. He plays stronger than he looks. He's got some technical abilities that may not be super advanced right now, but he is very effective, especially when you combine it with his quickness off the line of scrimmage. 10 sacks last season as a sophomore, I guess he is. Yeah, he's going into his junior year, and 12 quarterback hurries. He was credited for outstanding potential for Tristan Givens. Another new addition to the Rivals 250 from the Southeast, really the state of Georgia, Anthony Davis, outside linebacker who won linebacker MVP at the Atlanta Rivals camp, a stacked group at that Atlanta Rivals camp. It was kind of an upset for him to win that award, and he just really blew us away, and the film backs up what we saw on the field there.
Yeah, just an incredibly active linebacker who is a downhill guy on Friday nights. And we know, the Grayson and Bufords of the world up in Georgia, they've got a million players, right? So they rotate in blue chip recruits and rotate in guys who are 20, 30 offers in who don't play every single down. So he was one of those last year. I think this year he's going to come into his own. And we really saw him take a leap just from a physical standpoint at the Rivals camp in Atlanta. And like you said, Adam, total upset. I mean, we knew the group was stacked when we saw the guys who were signing up. So we were focused kind of on the 25 class. Like, hey, one of these guys, Daryl Johnson, Luke Metz, one of these guys is going to win MVP. And then we'll take a look at the rest of these guys. But here's Anthony Davis in 2026, just incredibly comfortable in coverage, covers ground well, runs well, flips his hips almost like a safety. And then he played the football well on top of it. Typically with linebackers, you see, even if they're in position, there's an awkwardness when the ball arrives. Not with Davis. So you talk about, again, evaluating to the modern game. That's what you're looking for, that 3-down value. And this time from a coverage perspective, very comfortable projecting Anthony Davis as a high-level recruit who you could see covering running backs, tight ends, maybe even walling off some slot receivers. I think he's that comfortable in space and that athletic.
Yeah, definitely. On film, too. I mean, yes, you mentioned he is a downhill player on film, a big hitter. He fills those running lanes. He chases ball carriers to the edge when they're running outside. But on passing plays, you can see him drop and really affect those passing lanes that those quarterbacks are looking for. Really liked what we saw from Davis. We've got him 6'2", about 200 pounds or so. He looks a little bit heavier than that, and I would imagine he transitions some of that body weight to more solid mass than we saw him with at the Atlanta Rivals camp. A lot of big expectations for him moving forward. A few other new additions I wanted to call out in the Southeast to the Rivals 250. Samuel Roseborough, an offensive tackle from Florida at 163. Javar Bowden, a tight end from Florida, 177 in the Rivals 250. Zion Gibson, a cornerback from Alabama, at 190. And Kendall Gerville, a defensive tackle from Florida, at 195. Any parting shots on these guys, John, before we get you out of here?
Well, we've long been fascinated with Javar Bowden, 6'7", and it's a legitimate 6'7". We hear he's closer to 200 pounds now, which is great because I think we have him listed at like 185. So you're just like, man, put on some weight and let's see where this thing goes. But he's a guy, of course, with a basketball background who plays above the rim. And on Friday nights, and certainly on 7-on-7, we see a lot of range with this type of modern, longer, leaner tight end. So again, when you talk about, playing to the modern game, these are the mismatch type players that colleges are looking for on offense. And his offer list has reflected that over the last few months. Just visited Georgia as a coveted target of theirs, Florida State. Everyone's in the Southeast on Javar Bowden. So he's one who we might still be a little low on, depending on how he fills out and balances out as a tight end. But the potential there at 6'7" with great athleticism is obviously something we're keeping an eye on.
Yeah, he comes in at number 10 in the tight ends rankings nationally, and just you just heard how excited John is about him as a prospect. The top 10 tight ends in this class are really, really impressive. Kendra Harrison at the top, Caden Prothro, Brock Harris, Corbin Fordham, Carson Sneed, Hezzy Kent, Max Sutter, J.C. Anderson, Xavier Taylor, and then Bowden. Those 10 guys could almost choose anywhere in the country that they want to go to, unless they take one of the spots that the other guy is looking for. But we're excited about Bowden for sure, and I wouldn't be surprised if he continues to move up the Rivals 250 as we learn more about him. So, John, thanks so much for joining me here on the Rivals Rankings podcast, breaking down the big moves in the 2026 rankings update. Please make sure you catch all of John's content on Rivals.com and do give him a follow on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
I'm joined now by National Recruiting Director Adam Gorney here on the Rivals Rankings podcast, breaking down the biggest moves in the 2026 Rivals 250 and position rankings update. Gorney, out on the West Coast, a few of the highest ranked players in the Rivals 250 call the West Coast home. First up is Chris Henry. He's number 3 in the Rivals 250 right now. What do you think the chances are of him staying in the top 5 going forward?
Yeah, very likely. I don't know if any receiver right now is pushing him for number 1 at the position. I'm not totally locked in with him being the number 1 receiver for the entirety of the class, like I basically was with Jeremiah Smith, and it looks like will happen with DeCorian Moore. But Henry is very, very impressive. You know, a lot of the top receivers in the NFL now are these sort of 6 foot, 6'1" guys that can play in space, a lot like college football. Henry is 6'5", legit 6'4.5", 6'5", outside target, but he can run, he can move. He's a great route runner. He can go up over the top of cornerbacks. So he's been very impressive again this offseason, and now I'm excited to see him in his junior year at Mater Dei. So he is a very solid number 1 wide receiver right now, which puts him in the top 5 nationally.
Yeah, position value of that, of receivers is rising, and so I'm with you there on him, the number 1 receiver, likely a top 5 prospect, regardless of who sits in that position. I am interested to see how his body looks going into this season. He's added a little bit of weight. We'll see if he's able to stay as agile as we would hope he could be. Just behind Chris Henry in the Rivals 250 is Ryder Lyons, new number 1 quarterback in the Rivals 250, right over Brady Smigel at number 5. We switched the order up there. Smigel began this ranking cycle as number 1 quarterback, but what really precipitated this move, putting Lyons ahead of Smigel?
Yeah, I think it was just seeing them and charting their progression this offseason. Lyons is sort of like today's quarterback. He's dynamic. He throws on the run a ton. He put up big numbers at Folsom last season, and I don't want to sort of be fooled by that because pretty much every quarterback does in that offense. But then, he came to the Rivals camp in LA and looked great there. He's looked very good at other events. Definitely a pocket passer, but someone who can get out and throw on the run. And then he had almost 1,000 rushing yards this year with 20 plus touchdowns running the ball. And some of those were designed runs, but some of that was just escaping pressure and making something happen. So he has that like dynamic ability that you're looking for in today's game. Smigel is more of the, 6'4" pocket passer, throw it all over the field, and coach's son, very smart, mature beyond his years, those kinds of things. So we like both very, very much. I'll take the dynamic athletic ability slightly over Smigel, but both are very, very good players.
Smigel kind of reminds me of what the way we thought about Julian Sayin early in the process for him. He was much more mechanical and really a more of a pocket passer and distributor of the ball than he was an athlete, which he developed into later on in his high school career. And we really saw that at the final evals of him. So it'll be interesting to see how Smigel's game develops moving forward, but I've always liked Lyons. The first time we had a conversation about the two of them, I was more on the Lions bandwagon at that point, I think. But I like the two of them. I think the future is very bright for both of them. Sticking on the West Coast, there a big riser out there, a track superstar. Brandon Arrington moved up 76 spots, up to number 52 in the Rivals 250. We've got him listed as an athlete, could play both sides of the ball in college, but any college coach in the country is going to want to have a guy like him with his speed out there on the field. What have you seen from Arrington? Where do you see him lining up in college?
Yeah, and this evaluation and ranking was based not on football really at all, because he hasn't done many football events at all this offseason. He is an elite track athlete. And that has really moved him up. He's had some really great races this offseason, put up some elite national times. And I've even told his people, I said, hey, he's got to get on a football field if we're going to consider him for a 5-star ranking. Like, I get the track stuff. I totally get the track times. I'm not a fool. I understand that he's a phenomenal athlete, but that also has to translate to a football field. How does he hit people? How does he get hit? How does he deal with physicality off the line of scrimmage? These are questions that we had and that were answered numerous times with guys like Gatlin Bear, who's actually faster than Arrington, and Nick Harbor, and Damani Jackson was an elite track athlete who also played a ton of football. Though these are the questions that we have. You cannot just be on a track the entire offseason and expect to be ranked and put a first round grade on you. So we want to see you on a track. We love that you're a multi-sport athlete, but one of those sports has to be football. He has to play more football in the offseason. We will see him during the season with pads on. I think that will be an important evaluation tool to see. It is, I'm not saying it's easy to run those times in the 100 and 200 meters, but it's a lot harder when someone's jamming you at the line to get into your route, or it's a lot harder when a receiver is coming at you and you have to put your shoulder into somebody to knock the ball out. So there are definitely things we want to see from a football perspective on Arrington, but there's no question he's an elite athlete and one of the best in this class.
Yeah, those times are harder to come by when you got full pads on, right? And running in, maybe some longer grass and not on a track itself. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on there going forward. We've got a bunch of new additions to the Rivals 250 from the West Coast. Troy Hune, a big-time quarterback, enters the Rivals 250 at number 105. Vance Spafford, a receiver, at 173. Xavier Owens, another receiver, at 179. Luke Fahey, a quarterback, at 181. And R.J. Sermons at cornerback from California as well, at number 196. I want to talk about Hune and Fahey for a minute because, quarterbacks, they get all the headlines, especially on the West Coast. Hune's a massive guy, right? A huge guy who does a really good job distributing the ball. Word is that he might be a lean towards Texas at this point. What do you think about his game and how he might transition to the college game?
Yeah, he's not massive. He's just, on the taller side. He's kind of tall and a little lean. But Texas has sort of targeted him from early on, fell in love with him. They had a bunch of quarterbacks at their elite camp this past week, and he was one of them. And they didn't offer another California quarterback because they've sort of circled him as the guy. Sark and Milwee love him. So I think that is going to be it would be a surprise if he wasn't included in the 2026 Texas class. He loves it there. He loves the offense. He's a smart kid. He's grounded. All of those kinds of things fit the system. So I do think that Texas is the leader there. He was not great at the Steve Clarkson camp. There were two issues there. One, the field, the turf, the quarterbacks were slipping in their drop. And then they were using new balls. So those two things for a quarterback, as delicate as that sounds, they're actually important. But I've seen him, zing it all over the place. Often he's been very impressive. And so I think Texas is definitely the leader there. Fahey is a little more interesting. He split time a little bit at Mission Viejo last season. He is the California Power quarterback this offseason, and he has seen his recruitment take off. So he's coached by Chad Johnson at Mission Viejo, one of the best offensive minds in California. He has Vance Spafford as his favorite receiver, a guy that just gets open and catches everything, and Phillip Bell on the outside, who also had a very nice season. So both of those guys are definitely emerging talents. Fahey has really blown up this offseason and has he can kind of go anywhere. I think Ole Miss has interested him, but many others will be involved too.
Well, staying on those quarterbacks, there's one from the East who moved up in the rankings, Faison Brandon out of North Carolina. He moved up to number 134 in the nation. I got a chance to see him last season. He had 2 4-star receivers that he was throwing to in the 2024 class in Alex Taylor and Terrell Anderson. Both ended up going to ACC programs, and he's not going to have those receivers to throw to this year. It's going to be a big-time kind of prove-it year for him. He's had a pretty good offseason, done a few 7-on-7 tournaments, and certainly an imposing figure, tall, long arms, really built, has some mobility to him, and can really launch that ball down the field. Tennessee has the early edge right now, but he's going to take a lot of visits before making that final decision. On On the offensive side of the ball as well, we're looking at a guy like Jordan Gidron, big rise up the rankings, number 23 now, had some and really impressive times during the offseason at the Rivals Combine. He put up big numbers during the season too when he had his opportunities, and really like his ceiling there for sure. Also, a few other risers in the East I wanted to mention, Gorney. Aiden Harris, a defensive end from North Carolina. He's done a great job physically maturing this offseason. He's actually put on a couple of inches as well since the last time I saw him, and really looks like an impressive defensive end prospect. Another defensive end, Zion Ely, one of the best edge rushers in this class. He's still getting accustomed to playing against some elite competition, playing at a public school north of Baltimore in Joppatown, but he's getting some more experience. He's done a good job at the offseason camp series for Rivals, and he was also at the Under Armour camp as well. So we're going to get to see a lot more from him moving forward. Then two other offensive tackles that I wanted to mention too. Emmanuel Iheanacho jumped up to 5-star ranking from an early 3-star after we verified those measurables and got a chance to see him in person. And this guy's just a mountain of a human being, 6'7", 340 pounds, does a great job bending, staying balanced. He's incredibly strong, patient pass blocker, and just on film, he excels as a run blocker. He bowls over these guys. He's not playing amazing competition, but I think he could make anybody look pretty pedestrian when he's trying to block them for when the running backs are right behind him. And then also on the offensive tackle position, Pierre Dean Jr., really impressive player, strong, very lean, but has plenty of mass to his frame, really long arms, very technically sound and tough, really strong hands, can control defensive linemen when he's able to make contact, and a very good run blocker as well. Gorney, we talked a lot about these offensive tackles during the rankings calls, and there were some pretty strong opinions there as we moved just outside the 5-star range. What do you see from these offensive tackles, and how do you see this race playing out?
Yeah, so I think Iheanacho is someone who has moved up to 5-star status, rightfully so. I think he could even move higher, and this is one of these situations again. Jackson Cantwell is the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. He has phenomenal sophomore film where he's powerful but also athletic, can get to the second level to block, is a great pass blocker against speed edge rushers, can also maul people, push them into the pile, all those kinds of things as an offensive tackle. But again, there have been multiple opportunities to see him this offseason at national events, and he's just not doing them. So that is not necessarily going to plummet him in the rankings, but there is a difference between knocking people around in sort of rural Missouri and dealing with edge rushers from the Southeast and from across the country. So that needs to change. I think Cantwell has had multiple opportunities to get onto football fields this offseason, and he hasn't. Kinyi Pepe cannot stay off of a football field. So Emmanuel Iheanacho has been at multiple events. So I think those are sort of the things that we're looking for in terms of our ranking and our projection. It is definitely difficult to beat when both of your parents are Olympians and you're an elite shot putter, and all of those things are combined. But we also have to see you play the sport of football to rank you in football. And so I think that is an important thing. This class has a lot of variety at offensive tackle. You have your Iheanachos, who are just massive mountain of men. You have the athletic types like Max Riley and Pierre Dean, who still have not topped out physically, which we absolutely love. If you kind of do a study of who goes in the first round or the second or third round at offensive tackle, some of them played tight end in high school. Some were fullbacks. I mean, these guys, we don't want guys necessarily, unless they're really special, to be completely, topped out physically. So I think those guys are interesting. A guy like John Turntine is very interesting. We're going to see Kevin Brown at the Rivals 5-star in a few weeks. He's an athletic kid who could really move. Let's see how he deals with power. So it's a very interesting class because it's not just all huge guys. It's not just all athletic guys. It's a nice mix of guys who are sort of coming into form, and then guys who have been around for it feels like 4 or 5 years already, and like guys like Pepe, who we've known since 7th and 8th grade, who have been doing it really big.
Yeah, really special group, I think, and I think there's probably at least one more 5-star in the group. We'll have to see how they progress over the next basically year and a half, pretty much. So that'll do it for this edition of the Rivals Rankings podcast. National Recruiting Director Adam Gorney, thank you very much for joining me. I'm Rankings Director Adam Friedman. Please remember to subscribe to the Rivals.com YouTube channel and follow all of the Rivals social media accounts. And of course, you can find all of our content on Rivals.com. Thanks again, Adam.
Okay.